All right, this is the social effects of the Industrial Revolution and industrialization. We've talked a lot about what did the Industrial Revolution actually look like. You've looked at why the Industrial Revolution started in England. And now we're going to look at basically the social effects of industrialization. All the factories being built, why did or how did this movement impact England on a social scale? That's really what we're going to look at here to close out the podcast for this section. All right, so first of all, urbanization. I mean, this is a real easy one. As we talked about, the people are moving to the cities because the factories are there. The jobs are going there. The merchants have decided we're going to move all of my work to the city. I don't have to track everybody now in different places, cottage industry and things like that. Now we can have a situation where people are coming to work for me. So that people coming to work, the coming part, they're coming to the city too now to live. They're not going to be driving out in their SUVs and flying in their hovercrafts. They're actually going to be living in cities to be able to work in these jobs. It's the largest population transfer in human history, and again, it's primarily started in England. You've got your major cities in England. London's already there, but now we're going to have cities like Manchester, Birmingham, where if you look at a map of England, these minor cities in the, well, not minor, they're major cities, but in the middle of the island, of the country, these are cities that are going to be born in this period because of the growth of the cities and due to industrialization. And you have some stats down there about how many more larger cities that there are. You know, population is steadily going up. You have that too, but you also have the people moving into the cities. And with that, it's going to create new issues and problems that people primary or previous to this really didn't have to deal with. I mean, you might think that you live in a small house, but we're talking about apartments that are built in these cities to house so many new people moving in. If you're going to have people, families of 10 or more living in small apartments, I mean, think about our classroom. An apartment that size, 10 people living in that all the time. I mean, we fit in 30 in there every day, but 50 minutes we get to go our separate way. And now the way it is in the Industrial Revolution is these families are crowded into these small spaces. And because of those tight quarters, because of these hastily built apartments, such as this next one, right there, these tenement houses, you're going to have situations where disease is going to be spread rather easily. You have situations where sanitation is not really considered by many of these building owners and city planners and things like this. They don't anticipate these problems because, again, you've never had this movement of people to urban areas before, and it's these poor housing areas. They're really going to frame the lives of the working class in the revolution. And again, like I mentioned, you have a situation to where you have the spread of disease. And we're going to have a disease primarily called cholera. Okay, I don't know if my circle worked right there. Let me see if I can get around here. Oh, there we go. I see a line. Try not to push pause. Okay, whatever. You have the spread primarily of a disease called cholera, which is spread because people poop in the water. I mean, literally, that's how cholera is spread. So you have bad water with human waste inside of it. These hastily built apartment complexes, hastily built houses, no plan for sanitation or the removal of human waste. And you're going to have poop spread around in the water, people drink it, and then you get cholera and die. It's live, people. This is what happens. And actually, cholera becomes known as king cholera, and you have a lot of things in English culture which reflect the growth of that disease. And in essence here, the court of king cholera, as people have been brought to work and almost lambs to the slaughter, sacrificed to the king. I don't know, it's a little morbid, but I mean, these are realistic things that happen because of the growth of industry, at least short term. So now, we've looked at factory conditions, at least maybe not in the podcast. We're going to do a little bit more of that in class. But you've looked at reasons why England saw the growth of industry. We've looked at again, the roots of it. But now again, the social. How does the growth of factories impact the family? Well, back in the day when we had our cottage industry model, and we've seen that several times before, and the family was the economic unit. You know, you worked on those projects, those textile projects at home. Textiles, again, another word for clothes or cloth, shirts, what have you. And the family was the economic unit. Everyone would work themselves, and everyone will work together. But then, when the factories are built, the work is taken out of the home. And what begins to happen is these factory owners realize that if you make all of the family go work, which is what happens at first, the skilled adult males, the one who know how to run the machine or have a certain craft, a trade that they have that they can apply to the factory, these are the ones that you're going to want to pay more because they're better workers. They can handle the physical things that perhaps the majority of women and definitely the majority of children cannot handle. So what ends up happening is that most of the skilled adult males start to get the most wages. And they have the greatest demand in the factories. And eventually you get to the point where women and children are paid less. And as we're going to look at briefly, governments start to respond to the challenging conditions that women and children face in these factories. And they're going to put limitations on the amount of work that women and children can do in the factories. So all my feminists out there, you're going to be really sad because it's the way it's the world in the 19th century. It is recognized that women cannot do the work of men in these factories. And the governments are going to step in, especially England, France, Western Europe. They're going to step in to protect them. So what you start to see happen, women and men work less in these factories, and we had gender-determined roles at home and domestic life that slowly emerge. We're not talking about that they come around overnight. We're talking that they eventually emerge, in which the married woman, now keep in mind here, married, is going to be expected to work inside of the home. She is going to be the one that manages the household. We're talking again of married couples, okay? Single women obviously will have to work for themselves. The same can be said of widows. And they're going to take jobs that, if they don't have the skills, they're going to be unskilled and have very poor wages. And you're going to see them manning the machines in the factories. And we're going to see some pictures where that is reflected. And you see the difficult conditions that these people have to face because of their lack of skills. So again, this idea of where did the housewife thing come from? Where did you're a woman, go to the kitchen and make me a sandwich. Where does that come from? It's not that we thought of it all of our own. What happens is that the Industrial Revolution creates an atmosphere in which men, married men, if we go inside the confines of marriage, married men are expected to work in the factory because they have more of the skills and abilities to be able to work in those conditions. The married woman then is going to be in the home, granted, if she has if the wages of the factory for the male is good enough, the woman's going to be inside the home, taking care of the family, raising the kids, so the kids can grow up in a safe environment too. Now again, this all has to deal with your marital status. It also has to deal with your wealth status, socioeconomic. If you have less money, then the woman's going to have to figure out a way to work, and the kids as well. Looking at a broader scale, if we look at social classes, clergy, nobility, you're not really relevant anymore. The French Revolution kind of dealt with that in France. In England, we're getting to the point where the bourgeoisie are just incredibly dominant. These are your factory owners. They're not the workers, they're the owners. They're also professionals like bankers, lawyers, doctors, merchants, businessmen. They're going to be the ones, again, that seize the power in Parliament. They're going to be the ones become much, much more influential. Nobility are old money. Bourgeoisie are new money. Okay? And what also tends to happen sometimes is some of the bourgeoisie begin to imitate some of the old aristocracy with their lifestyle, their dress, their activities. They want to live that life of privilege, but they have the new ways of making money through these factories, through the trade, through business. Not because people pay you rent on your land, not because you were born into the right family. You are doing something to create your privilege. Okay, you also have inside of the bourgeoisie, the upper bourgeoisie, and you have the petite bourgeoisie, small industrialist professional men. That's very fancy sounding, professional men. I wonder if I'm a professional man. I mean, what would you have to do? I mean, think on that. Reflect. Professional man or professional woman? Are you a professional man or woman? Hopefully not both, but that's another discussion for another day. All right, so social stratification, a little more about social classes and how they're outlined. So you have the bourgeoisie, and the language is going to be important for us to understand. You're going to have the proletariat, the working class. So you've got the factory owners, but the workers are going to be the ones that make this all go, right? They're the ones making the goods that the bourgeoisie gains money off of. Granted, the bourgeoisie investing their own money into these projects. It's not like they're slave owners, okay? Some would argue that they are, but that's another discussion here soon enough. The proletariat earn a wage, live in the poor housing, many, again, cottage industry, poor peasants who have migrated to the cities. Poor working conditions, long hours in factories, brutal and unsafe conditions. We're going to see that in the Sadler Commission reading that we're going to do, but the conditions that these men and women have to face. And then, and here's something we'll chart or track a little bit, poorhouses open to care for the unemployed. If you can't find a job, government's going to start to open up things to take care of you, and it's going to mark a trend we're going to see throughout the whole 19th century. What is the role of government? Are they for the people to serve them or to serve the people? Which one is it? Which one is it today? I think it's pretty obvious which it is today. But again, we're going to see that track, compare it Western, Eastern Europe. It's going to be interesting to see. These guys, I don't know about them. Okay, here's a giant hand. I don't know. Back away slowly. So the whole thing is going to come down to, again, we're going to see the conflict between the working class and the business owners. And you could obviously say during the short term that the Industrial Revolution is a very, very bad thing for workers. I mean, looking at the conditions that they work in, we're going to see that, some of the things we look at in class. But long term, it's going to be a good thing because all of these goods that are high quality, whether it's clothing, manufactured goods, things that we'll see, they're going to be cheaper because there's so much more of a supply. Okay, and you know, if you have, let's talk about like clocks, for instance. Okay, you know, if clocks are constructed by hand, clocks are a bad example, but if they're constructed by hand, there's going to be fewer of them. Whether, you know, it doesn't matter how good quality they are, there's just going to be less of them. But if you have a machine creating or helping or aiding the manufacturing of it, there's going to be more of them. And with that, more people have access to these goods. Wages are also going to rise. So they're going to get better, and a lot of that has to do with inflation, but you see wages are going to go up. The negatives, housing remains poor, and then again, the inequality that we're going to see. Workers did not share in the wealth produced. That is only going to continue to grow. The wealth difference, the inequality between the rich and the poor, has always been an issue in our class, whether it's the nobility and bourgeoisie versus the peasants. But now, as our class goes on, we're going to see the inequality between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the rich and the poor, governments and the little man. Then just a little aside, I think these people are cool. You have people who see machines coming in and taking their jobs, and I mean, this is totally legitimate. And we looked at the looms and the spinning jennies and all those that you looked at. Instead of people making those, none of these machines are doing it, and you only have to have like one person manning the machine. So you're going to have an issue where you have people get upset and see the end of the world coming because their jobs are getting taken. These people are called the Luddites, and they're going to seek to destroy machines. Just go and beat them up, right? Take that printer, kick it in the pants or whatever it takes to make sure it doesn't work. So the Luddites are going to, play a role in things. They're not going to be a significant factor, but there they are. And then we're also going to see later down the road the influence of unions. And that's something that plays a huge part in our country today is, well, what's the role of the worker in all of this? How do you protect a worker? How do you protect the cog in the machine to make the good that so many of us can enjoy? How does that translate to other countries? Like when I'm holding this iPad right now. What went into the creation of this iPad? Is there blood, sweat, and tears in it? It's safe to say maybe at some point there is, and there have been studies done about that. And you can look that up today. What is the role of the worker?
And that started to be, and questions are started to be asked of that. Does the government protect the individual worker, or do the capitalists, do the bourgeoisie? And they're just trying to make money, and they go whatever it takes, Machiavelli style, to make that happen. Unions are formed to resist the exploitation of the proletariat, and at first, Parliament is going to outlaw unions, but as industrialization becomes more mainstream, the problems become more visible, they back off of that in 1824. You have a movement called Chartism, which looks to bring more political rights to workers in the English Parliament. And there are several things that I believe your reading goes a lot more in depth with that in terms of what happens. But here's the bottom line. Life gets better for workers, eventually. It doesn't happen overnight. Basically, this new thing that happens, the Industrial Revolution, governments don't know how to handle it at first, whether that be living conditions, working conditions, or what have you, other problems that are created. Over time, governments figure out a way to adapt to the situation, to draw a line between allowing the bourgeoisie to have freedom to create and giving the worker the ability to be protected and putting things in place to protect the worker. Where is the line of the government in that? And I think now, let me close with this, I think now we're in that situation with the technological revolution, starting in the 90s with the internet and now to smartphones and tablets and things of this nature. What role does the government play in restricting free speech? I mean, it's an important issue, I think, of our time. Is can the government restrict the speech of someone that perhaps has the intent to inflame public opinion? And I think we're in that transition period now where questions are being asked. But in our story here, it's the Industrial Revolution, and it's going to totally transform society as much as anything that we've studied so far this year.